Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darylyn and today I am feeling the summer vibes, you guys. Like, it is growing season, it is the height of the growing season and I'm just feeling like the weather's finally nice and I'm just like gonna like maybe go, I don't know, somewhere fun after this. But we're gonna do something so fun today. It is one of my favorite videos to make and I know you guys like them too because they usually do really well, and we are going to be canceling some plants and triggering some people. Now, before we get into it, today we're gonna go over canceled Monstera. Types of Monstera that used to be really popular, used to be really expensive, and now are not. But before we get into it, I want to remind everybody of the rules for these videos. This is supposed to be fun. This hot take is for entertainment purposes only. Millennials use the word canceled very liberally in a way that has nothing to do with cancel culture. So if you are triggered by the word canceled, click off the video, move on with your life. Do not take time out of your life that you will never get back writing nasty things in my comment section because I will block you. You will get 0 chances and that will be it. If you're not having fun, life is too short to watch content that you're not enjoying. So just please like move on, that's fine. But nasty comments from triggered people about something that has nothing to do with anything except for just like being cheeky, it's supposed to be fun, will not be tolerated. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. All right, cool. So for those of you who've seen this series before, you know this is just a fun, cheeky way to talk about plants that used to be super expensive and fancy and popular and that are now fallen from grace. Yeah, there's a lot of them these days ever since the plant boom kind of crashed. But yeah, the entire genus of Monstera like pretty much suffered. Everything except for like the Variegated Deliciosas just like had like kind of a swift fall. But first on our list is the Monstera Silpada. These were actually like kind of popular for a while. Like back at the beginning of, you know, kind of like the COVID plant boom, a lot of new people were getting into the hobby. It was getting a lot more popular. Things were becoming a lot more accessible, and there were a lot of people who were really interested in collecting the Monstera genus. Monstera Silpada is kind of like, I don't know, like the odd cousin, like the odd forgotten stepchild. Like, it doesn't look anything like a Monstera. It's like kind of silver, like it kind of looks like a Cebu blue almost. I don't know, like to me it doesn't really give Monstera vibes. I feel like this is like one of the ones that kind of just disappeared. Like you don't hear people talking about them, you don't hear people looking for as far as I know, like there's nothing really wrong with them. I think that if you can get them to the point where they are really thriving, eventually they will fenestrate, but I think it's really tough to do it. So most people just kind of know them as, you know, kind of like the Monstera version of a Cebu blue. I think they're fine. Like they're fine plant. Like I don't personally like them, but you know, like it's fine if you like them. They used to be really expensive though. Like I think back in the day, you know, Monstera like boom, kind of heyday. I mean, yeah, you'd probably have to pay like 50 or 60 bucks to get a cutting of one of these. I honestly have no idea what they would go for now. Definitely not that much. Every once in a while, I think they pop up in like big box stores, but they're just not popular. Like there's really just nobody looking for these. So sorry, unfortunately, Monstera Silpada, you're kind of canceled. All right, moving on. Next one is the Monstera Santaliana, specifically the variegated versions. There was an Alba version and there was also an Orient version. These plants like genuinely are canceled. Like back in the day, other than kind of like the variegated Monstera Deliciosas, I would say that the Monstera Santaliana, Alba, and Orient were kind of like the next like most desirable Monstera after the iconic Deliciosa varieties. And I have the Monstera Alba Santaliana. I do like it. I've had it for a really long time. I didn't spend like an exorbitant amount of money on it. I think I got a small plant and it was like 50 bucks, 70 bucks, something like that. Definitely way more than they would go for now. I think now, like you probably wouldn't be able to get more than like $10 or $15 for a cutting of Monstera Santaliana, Alba, or Orient now. I think part of the reason that these plants are just like canceled, like nobody likes them anymore, is because they just are terrible growers. Like they do the Monstera thing where they just shoot out runners if they're not happy. The other thing about them that I don't think most people like were really prepared to deal with is that they truly are like medium to low light plants. Like they don't love being blasted with light. They just want to be wet. Like they want water constantly. So it was just like kind of a like specialized care. And then the ones that were like the most beautiful, like most of them didn't look like that. So I think people just got like sick of dealing with their drama, honestly. You know, there wasn't enough reward for the effort that was required. People needed space for other stuff, and like so many people got rid of these. I do still have mine. I do like it. I am planning to probably like grow it up something at some point. If it died, I wouldn't replace it. But yeah, at one point it was, you know, a few $100s, like mid triple digits to get like really, really nice variegated specimens of Santaliana, Alba, and Orient. I mean, they were expensive, but not anymore. Now, I mean, you could probably still get them. If you just said you wanted to find one in a group, I'm sure somebody would have one and would sell them to you. But yeah, no, I mean, not for anywhere near that much money. Honestly, like $10 to $15. Like maybe if it had spectacular variegation, like 40, canceled. Monstera Santaliana, sorry, you're just not a good grower. Nobody likes you, canceled. Oh my God, this next one's a good one. This one's bad. So this is the Monstera Peru variegated. I think sometimes people call it Monstera Carstentianum or something along those lines. I don't remember where, but I do remember seeing something where like those are two different things. Actually, there is a distinct plant called Monstera Peru. And back in the day, that was all that anyone was talking about, was the variegated Monstera Peru. These, oh my God, I never see these anymore. Like nobody's looking for them. Nobody's selling them. Like when I do see them being sold, like God, I feel like I saw a variegated Peru not that long ago for like mid double digits. Like I want to say it wasn't even like 60 bucks. It was so cheap compared to what they used to be, because back in the heyday of like Monstera mania, variegated Peru was like $800 and they were known for being so unstable and so finicky, and just like the variegation was so hard to preserve. They're really notorious for like the leaves turning yellow. They're just not good growers, and God, $800. Oh, and they were just so unstable. Like I remember seeing lots of posts of people like struggling with the variegation on their variegated Perus. Like I didn't know this, but apparently if you mature them enough, they will fenestrate, which is like wild to me because they're very like bullate. Like they're kind of like the Anthurium luxurians version of a Monstera. I mean, I do think they're cool plants. Like I have seen them in big box stores in like big baskets, and the leaves get pretty big, and I mean they're cool plants, but like variegated versions of it for $800, like I just don't. Just considering how unstable they were and how they're not the easiest plants to keep looking nice, like I could see why people just like gave up on them after a while, and why like now like you just never see them. And I think that this is a perfect example of a plant that is canceled, and why. Like no, people aren't gonna put up with that for very long if things are not good. All right, so next is the Monstera Epipremenoides. And I think that this actually got a new name. I think it's like Monstera Esqueleto. It's either Monstera Esqueleto was renamed Epipremenoides or the other way around. But anyway, these are actually really, really cool because they're not Monstera Adamsonia, like they're their own species, but they're kind of, to me at least, they remind me of like an absolutely gigantic Monstera Adamsonia. Like the leaves get huge and they get these big holes, and like they're very, very cool plants. Like they're very striking. Like I would probably be open to growing one if I had like the space for it, and maybe somewhere that was really tall where I could let the plant grow up really tall. Yeah, they used to be so expensive, like mid triple digits for sure for a cutting of Epipremenoides. I think they did used to be pretty rare, but as soon as they started becoming available, like the prices really went down on them because they're just so big. They're just not practical to grow, I think, for most people. I don't know if they're like super difficult to grow. My guess is that they're probably about as difficult as a Monstera Adamsonii. And honestly, Monstera Adamsonii is not the easiest plant to get growing and looking amazing. And so my guess is that like people just kind of didn't really like get the bang for their buck with the Epipremenoides because, you know, the pictures that they saw that like probably sold them on the plant were of these like huge leaves full of holes. And my guess is they probably, you know, got like small cuttings and then were never able to get the plant to size up. And then it just wasn't like, it was kind of anticlimactic and they just were kind of over it. You know, the prices just didn't stay up. I haven't seen these for sale in forever. I haven't seen them for sale in so long. I think somebody posted that they had them at the Aquagenera that's kind of nearby where I live, and they were selling them for like a pretty big established plant for like $170 or something. And like, that is completely unheard of back in the day when, you know, they were going for like $600 for a cutting or whatever. But yeah, definitely not even close. Like that plant's canceled for sure. All right, so another variegated one, the Variegated Lichlariana. So I'm not exactly too sure that canceled is like the best way to describe what happened with the Monstera Lichlariana variegata. I genuinely think that this might be like more accurately described as a plant that kind of flopped more so than is canceled. But I mean, whatever, we're talking about the genus in general, so we'll throw her in here. Yeah, like these came out towards the kind of tail end of like plant mania. And I kind of just think they like weren't gonna get a fair chance just because there's already like Alba Monstera Deliciosa is already so beautiful. And like the Lichlariana is just not, it's just not as nice. And at that point, Alba prices had already come down a little bit. I mean, they were still, you know, like a few $100s for like a plant. But like the Lichlariana, they were trying to sell it for, you know, a lot of money because it was like a new thing, but I just don't think that people like ever like really cared about it or it ever really caught on. Like, I just don't think that anyone who's gonna be interested in a variegated Lichlariana doesn't already have a variegated Albo, probably wouldn't like the Lichlariana as much as the Albo, so like why would they pay more for it? So I don't know. I think the people probably like misread the room on the variegated Lichlariana because it never really like had a moment or like launched. I mean, if you're like really into variegated Monstera, I guess it's like a cool one to just like have in the collection. But yeah, I mean, I don't even really think it's as nice as like Variegated Adamsonii, which, oh boy, let's talk about canceled plants. Variegated Adamsonii is so canceled, like every single variety of it. There are actually quite a few Variegated Adamsonii forms, but the first one that came out was just the Adamsonii Albo variegated version, and it was just white variegation. It didn't have any mint at all. It was just white variegation. When those first came out, they were going for like $5,000 for a cutting. $5,000 for a cutting. And they were notorious for being unstable and for doing like half moons or like alternating like one leaf white, one leaf green, one leaf half moon. They just weren't like particularly stable, and the prices on those fell so fast. But I remember back in like 2021, there was a channel that did a like a tour with some collectors. I think it was, okay, no, I remember. It was Legends of Monstera, and he did a tour with SoCal Tropics, and they had this huge pot, giant pot of beautifully variegated Adamsonii, and they were saying that they estimated that the whole plant was worth like $30,000. Like, that to me is crazy. Like, I honestly think, at least where I live, you would have trouble selling that same plant now for like $200. It's just like, nobody likes them. Nobody wants them. They're known to be difficult and finicky and like melting. Honestly, like Adamsonii is not the easiest plant to grow. Like, unless you're just getting like a basket of it from a big box store and like hanging it and just like going with it until it dies, like they're not easy to get growing up a pole and like thriving in ambient humidity. But yeah, I mean, just the straight up Albo version for sure is like the most canceled. But then there's also like the mint Adamsonii, which I talked about in my plants that flopped video. Why that plant flopped, there's like a whole story. Then there was like the European mint version. That plant majorly flopped. Like, that never took off. There was the Archipelago version / the Ghost version that like kind of just stayed this like white color. Oh, and then eventually there was like Adamsonii Aurea variegated too. I don't really remember like how excited anybody was about that, but that was around for a while too. Haven't seen it in forever. But the most prestigious form of the variegated Adamsonii was the Japanese tricolor from Kunzo in Japan, and those were going for like $900 for a cutting for a while. Like when they first started getting sold and entering the community, like the consciousness of the community. Yeah, the Japanese tricolors were still like really expensive, close to $1,000 for like a small plant. Those I think are still definitely like the most sought after variegated Adamsonii, but I mean, they're still not that expensive. I think the variegated tricolors, like, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I think I would probably struggle to sell one of those for like $70 I don't think that that's even close to, I think $40 would probably be more accurate for what I could expect to get for a nice variegated tricolor at this point. Yeah, like they're just canceled. Nobody cares about variegated Adamsonii anymore. Like they're just not nice plants. Like even like as far as the growing experience, they're really, really difficult to grow and to size up and to like keep the variegation like nice and balanced. And I think that like even though the prices on like Monstera albos have come down a ton, like those plants are definitely not canceled. Like people are still clamoring to buy them. It's just for much less than it used to be. But like if you post an albo cutting for like, you know, a good price, it's gone immediately. Like you post variegated Adamsonii cuttings for cheap, like people, they sit. Like it's a totally different world. Variegated Adamsonii like is definitely one of the most canceled Monstera on this list for sure. So next, I would say the Monstera Dubaya. These were really, like, there was a lot of interest in these for a while. They're very cool morphologically. They shingle up something that they're climbing, and then as they mature, they lose their like juvenile silver coloration, and then they start to fenestrate, and then eventually the big mature leaves are like, they're huge, and like the fenestrations are really cool looking. They're very distinct looking, but again, these were just a plant that almost nobody who didn't have greenhouse conditions and like a 50-foot tall tree for the plant to climb was going to be able to achieve that. And I think people generally kind of had trouble just getting them to shingle on a plank. I had some at one point, and I had my plants in a greenhouse outside, and they did not survive out there. They were just, I think they're more sensitive plants than maybe people were really hoping that they were. Yeah, they were pretty expensive there for a while, but yeah, I almost never see them for sale now. And when I do, they're not for very much money. But they're cool. I mean, if somebody has like a mature one, I would love to see pictures of it. But I know for me personally, like I wouldn't be able to grow those in my conditions. And yeah, people have they've lost interest in Monstera Dubaya. I don't think there'll be like a resurgence. Only way that there would be a resurgence on those would be if some like influencer who has an audience of mostly beginners like showed big one. Then those people who like don't know the story and don't know the struggle with it might, go out and try and buy it. But like I don't think that anyone who's like aware of the story is interested in trying to mess with that plant. So then runner up on this list, I think you're gonna be surprised who the runner up is, because this is probably should be considered the most canceled Monstera ever. But the only reason it's runner up is because I've had it in a previous canceled plants video, but that is the Monstera Oblica. That plant was that was the holy grail of not just Monstera, but just plants in general. Back in, 2021, they were going for thousands of dollars for a small plant. I mean, to be fair, they are the craziest looking plant I've ever seen. They're very cool. They look they're basically mostly 90% air or something, I guess is what people used to say about them. And the Monstera Oblica Peru genuinely was a rare plant unicorn for years and years and years and years before the plant boom happened. And then once there started being all this interest in them and people became aware that they could sell them for $4,000, a few people did sell some. Immediately they started becoming easier to find, and then the price just went down, 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 and it became a race to the bottom. And now, I mean, back then it was $4,000, $2,000, quadruple digits to get a Monstera Oblica at the peak. The one that I saw that sold for the most money, it was this huge mother plant. I think it sold for $26,000, but then, very quickly it became $800 for a node, and then it was $200 for a plant, and then it just, now, I mean, mean, you can probably get them for like a node for $20. You probably get a node as a freebie add-on, honestly. I don't know, like if I was gonna buy like an actual plant, like maybe I could get one for 40 bucks. Maybe, I don't know. It would just depend on like how many people even still have them, because I think genuinely a lot of people were just like, oh, well, if I can't make money off of them anymore, I'm not going to bother, because you have to keep them in greenhouse conditions, basically. Those ones are donezo. But before we get to the number one most canceled Monstera, I'm gonna give an honorable mention to the variegated Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, which like, don't come for me. I know it's not technically a Monstera, but people call it mini Monstera, and it kind of it's Monstera adjacent. So it gets an honorable mention because there were variegated tetraspermas at one point that were being sold for like $25,000. And they are still like kind of expensive, like if they have really nice variegation. You know, I think you could, like, they're definitely still in the a couple $100 range. I don't think that you can get a variegated tetrasperma with nice color for under $100, definitely not. But going from $25,000 down into like triple digits is a pretty swift fall, I would have to say. I never was really into these, but some of them are kind of coming up that are like more like green on green variegated, and they're pretty, but yeah. Like, canceled. All right, so last but not least, people are gonna be mad about this, but it's just true, you guys. I didn't cancel these plants. The market did. The plant community did. I am but the humble messenger. But the number one most canceled Monstera on this list is the Monstera Thai Constellation, which is very sad. I honestly think so, because they're beautiful plants. Like, they're very, very beautiful. And I, in theory, would love to have one if I had space for one. But like, the reason that they're canceled, it's like a mix of politics and then just like the plants being hard to grow. But like, anyone who's had a Thai-con or known people that have Thai-cons or just like been in the plant community, Thai constellations are known for being absolutely horrendous when it comes to not just root rot, but also stem rot. And part of the reason that they're so challenging is that they are a large form Monstera, and large form Monsteras, their nodes grow like so close together that it's really difficult to stop the rot from spreading, because there's just like not very much like extra that you can trim away if you only have like one or two nodes on your plant. And then they just seem to be like more susceptible to rot because of the variegation or something in their genetics. Part of the reason that like the pricing on them got like kind of messed up, because back when I first got into aeroids in like, you know, 2020 or whatever, the Thai-cons weren't as expensive as Albos, but they were still a few $100s to get a small Thai-con. You know, the prices were going up and up and up, and then, but there was always this like rumor that Costa Farms, which is like a big plant company in North America, was tissue culturing Thai-cons, and that they were going to have mature Thai-cons available for $99. We just had to wait. We're just waiting for the Costa Farms Thai-cons. We're just waiting. And so this like kind of created this pent up demand for the Thai-con that like genuinely did affect the price of them, because there were a lot of people that thought that $99 for a mature plant was a reasonable price. So the price kind of started coming down, and it was still like hundreds of dollars for Thai-cons, and like for big ones it was still into like, you know, maybe like $2,000 back then. But eventually it became apparent that Costa Farms was not going to be successful with actually offering $99 plants. Like it just like the tissue culture, like something didn't go right. They weren't going to be able to make enough plants to meet the demand. Honestly, after that happened, a lot of people were just like, I give up. Like, I'm never going to be able to afford a plant at the prices that people sell them for. I just wanted a big plant. Like, people were so mad about this. This was a big deal when this happened. And honestly, it was like last year that this happened, that people finally gave up on the fantasy of the $99 Costa Farms Thai-con. I think a lot of people at that point did kind of start looking for a plant and like did buy a plant, but you know, the mystique of them kind of never really recovered. And then I think what was really the nail in the coffin is that but like the tissue culture labs in Southeast Asia just way overproduced them, and there was way too much stock, and they started offering them at like crazy low prices. And so a lot of people who had existing relationships with Southeast Asian exporters like got a whole bunch of Taikon plantlets just because they were so cheap, and then the availability just absolutely exploded, and they're still known for being really hard plants to grow, and like rot is really difficult with them. In addition to the fact that they're a large form Monstera and eventually could get gigantic, like there's not that many people that have a spot for a plant that could get that big inside their house, and most people do not live somewhere where a Taikon could live outside. And so I think it was just like a perfect storm, a perfect confluence of a whole bunch of things, and the pricing on them just absolutely collapsed. And like, I mean, I think now like you can get a small plant for like anywhere from 60 to like the 120, depending on like how nice the variegation is and who you're getting it from. You know, I routinely do see people trying to sell like larger ones, and it's always like, oh, it doesn't fit in my space anymore, and they're trying to get a few $100s for it, and they never sell. They never sell. Like, no. Earlier today, I saw someone in a plant group being like, how do I save my Taikon? It's rotting. Like, I just kind of don't think that I would bother with a Taikon at this point. I mean, I think they're beautiful. And I mean, in theory, I would love to have a beautiful one, but they're tough, man. They're tough plants. They're huge. They get big. Like, I don't have anywhere to put. Like, I have enough gigantic, you know, Monstera as it is. Like, I don't have room for another one. So I think that's why the Taikon's canceled. And I think that that plant definitely does deserve the moniker of canceled, along with the other ones that we talked about today. So I hope you guys had fun. I know a lot of you really find it entertaining when I talk smack. And if we are meeting for the first time, I hope that you had fun and that this was entertaining for you. So thank you so much for chilling with me. I will see you in my next one. Bye.